The highway stretched endlessly before Joshua, a ribbon of asphalt slicing through the Arizona desert, shimmering under the brutal midday sun. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the cherry-red Mustang convertible, the wind whipping his dark hair into a frenzy, as if it could blow away the storm of thoughts clouding his mind. He was running, not from a place, but from a truth he wasn't ready to face. Joshua, 25, had always been the golden boy of his small coastal town in Maine. Star quarterback, valedictorian, the guy everyone loved, but no one truly knew. His life was a carefully curated performance. Each smile a mask, each handshake a deflection. But now, miles from home, with nothing but open road and the hum of the engine, the mask was slipping. He glanced at the passenger seat, where Ethan sprawled, his blonde hair catching the sunlight like a halo. Ethan, his best friend since freshman year at NYU, was everything Joshua wasn't, unapologetically himself, fearless, and, most dangerously, openly gay. "Dude, you're driving like we're in a chase scene," Ethan teased, his hazel eyes glinting with mischief as he propped his feet on the dashboard. "What's got you so tense? We're on a road trip, not auditioning for Fast and Furious." Joshua forced a laugh, his grip tightening. "Just trying to make it to Santa Fe before we're old men." "You got the map?" Ethan waved his phone lazily. "Google Maps says we're golden." "Chill, Josh. This is supposed to be fun." "Fun." The word felt foreign. This trip was meant to be an escape, a post-grad adventure before real life sank its claws into them. They'd planned it for months, a cross-country drive from New York to California, hitting every quirky diner, national park, and dive bar along the way. But for Joshua, it was more than that. It was a chance to outrun the secret he'd buried so deep it felt like a second heartbeat. He'd known for years, since he was 15, stealing glances at the boys' locker room, his heart racing for reasons he couldn't name. He dated girls, played the part, but every touch felt like a lie. And then there was Ethan, who'd come out at 19 with a defiant grin, as if the world could either love him or leave him. Joshua envied that courage. He craved it. And lately, he craved Ethan. The first night, they stopped at a dusty motel just outside Flagstaff. The neon sign flickered vacancy, and the clerk, a bored woman with a cigarette-stained voice, handed them a single key. "Only one room left," she drawled. "One bed. You boys okay with that?" Joshua's stomach lurched, but Ethan just shrugged. "We've shared worse. Remember that couch in Brooklyn?" The room was a time capsule of bad decisions. Shag carpet, a lumpy queen bed, and a TV that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. Joshua dropped his bag by the door, avoiding the bed like it was radioactive. Ethan, oblivious, flopped onto it, stretching out with a groan. This is heaven after 6 hours in the car. Joshua busied himself unpacking, his movements jerky. "You take the bed. I'll crash on the floor." Ethan propped himself up on his elbows, frowning. "Don't be stupid. We're adults. We can share a bed without making it weird." Weird. The word stung. Joshua wanted to scream that it was weird, that lying next to Ethan would unravel him, that every casual touch, a hand on his shoulder, a playful shove, lit his skin on fire. But he just nodded, muttering, "Fine." That night, as Ethan's steady breathing filled the room, Joshua lay awake, inches away, staring at the ceiling. The secret pulsed in his chest, louder than ever. He wasn't just running from home. He was running from himself, and from the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of what might happen if he stopped. The next morning, they hit the road again, the tension between them unspoken but heavy. Ethan blasted classic rock, singing off-key to Springsteen, while Joshua tried to focus on the horizon. They stopped at a diner in Albuquerque, where Ethan flirted shamelessly with the waiter, a lanky guy with a lip ring. Joshua stared at his coffee, the jealousy twisting like a knife. "You okay, man?" Ethan asked later, as they walked back to the car. "You've been quiet. Just tired," Joshua lied, sliding behind the wheel. Ethan didn't push, but his gaze lingered, searching. Joshua wondered if he saw it, the truth flickering in his eyes, begging to be set free. By dusk, they reached a campsite near Taos. The desert stretched out like a painting, all reds and purples under a sky that seemed too big to be real. They set up a fire, the crackle of wood mingling with the distant howl of coyotes. Ethan pulled out a flask, passing it to Joshua with a grin. "To freedom," he toasted. Joshua took a swig, the whiskey burning his throat. "To freedom," he echoed, but the word felt hollow. Freedom wasn't a place you could drive to. It was something you had to claim. As the fire died down, Ethan leaned closer, his shoulder brushing Joshua's. "You ever feel like you're hiding something from the world?" he asked, his voice soft, almost lost in the night. Joshua's breath caught. He wanted to spill everything, to tell Ethan he'd been in love with him for years, that every laugh, every glance, was a lifeline. But fear clamped down, and he just shrugged. "Doesn't everyone?" Ethan's eyes held his, steady and searching, and for a moment, Joshua thought he might say it anyway. But then Ethan looked away, and the moment slipped through his fingers like sand. The road to Santa Fe was a blur of sagebrush and endless sky. But inside the Mustang, the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Joshua kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was on Ethan, on the way his laugh filled the car, the way his fingers drummed on the armrest, oblivious to the chaos he stirred in Joshua's chest. Every mile brought them closer to something Joshua couldn't name, and it terrified him. They checked into a boutique hotel in Santa Fe, a step up from the Flagstaff Motel, with adobe walls and a courtyard glowing with fairy lights. The clerk, a cheerful woman with a thick Southern accent, handed them a key. "You're in luck," she said. "Last room. One king bed. Hope that's all right." Joshua's heart stuttered, but Ethan just grinned. "We're used to it by now." The room was cozy, with a wrought iron bed frame and a quilt that looked handmade. Ethan tossed his bag onto a chair and kicked off his sneakers, his ease a stark contrast to Joshua's rigid posture. "You want to hit the town?" Ethan asked, stretching. "Santa Fe's got some killer bars." Joshua hesitated. A bar meant crowds, alcohol, and the risk of his guards slipping. But Ethan's hopeful grin was impossible to resist. "Sure," he said, forcing a smile. They ended up at a lively cantina, all exposed beams and mariachi music. Ethan ordered margaritas, his charm pulling the bartender into a laughing conversation. Joshua watched, his chest tight with a mix of admiration and envy. Ethan moved through the world like he belonged in every corner of it, while Joshua felt like an imposter, even in his own skin. As the night wore on, the drinks loosened Joshua's edges. He found himself laughing louder, leaning closer to Ethan, their knees brushing under the table. Ethan's eyes sparkled, and when he reached for Joshua's hand to pull him onto the dance floor, Joshua didn't resist. The music was fast, but their movements were slow, a sway that felt more like an embrace. For a moment, Joshua let himself imagine this was real, that he could be this version of himself, unafraid, unhidden. Back at the hotel, the single bed loomed larger than ever. Ethan collapsed onto it, still buzzing from the night. "You were actually fun tonight," he teased, patting the space beside him. "Come on, don't make me sleep alone in this giant bed." Joshua's throat tightened. He climbed in, keeping to the edge, but Ethan's warmth was inescapable. As the room grew quiet, Joshua's thoughts raced. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but the secret held him back like a chain. The next day, they drove toward Colorado, the landscape shifting to rugged mountains and pine forests. Ethan was quieter, his usual banter replaced by long stretches of silence. Joshua wondered if he'd noticed the way Joshua's eyes lingered too long, the way his voice softened when he said Ethan's name. They stopped at a scenic overlook, the Rockies sprawling before them like a promise. Ethan leaned against the guardrail, his expression unreadable. "You ever think about what you'd do if you could start over?" he asked suddenly. "Like, be whoever you want. No baggage." Joshua's pulse quickened. "All the time," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not that easy." Ethan turned to him, his gaze piercing. "Why not? What's stopping you?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Joshua wanted to say it. "I'm in love with you. I've always been in love with you." But the words caught in his throat, and he looked away, the moment slipping away again. That night, in a cramped motel in Durango, the pattern repeated, one bed, one sleepless night. Joshua lay awake, listening to Ethan's breathing, each inhale a reminder of the distance he couldn't bridge. He wondered how long he could keep running from himself, and what it would cost if he never stopped. The Colorado mountains loomed like silent judges as Joshua and Ethan continued their journey, the Mustang winding through passes where the air grew thin and sharp. Joshua's secret felt heavier with every mile, a weight that pressed against his ribs, threatening to crack them open. Ethan's silence, once a rare anomaly, had become a pattern, and Joshua couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, not with judgment, but with a quiet, aching curiosity. They stopped in Telluride, a picturesque town nestled in a valley, its streets lined with Victorian storefronts and pride flags fluttering in the breeze. The festival atmosphere was infectious, with rainbow banners and laughing crowds spilling from bars. Ethan's mood lifted, his grin returning as he dragged Joshua to a street fair. "Come on, Josh, live a little," he said, tossing him a rainbow wristband. Joshua caught it, his fingers lingering on the fabric. He wanted to wear it, to let it mean something, but fear coiled tighter. He stuffed it in his pocket instead, muttering, "Not really my thing." Ethan's smile faltered, but he didn't push. They wandered through the fair, eating overpriced tacos and watching drag queens perform on a makeshift stage. Joshua felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, the vibrant freedom around him both exhilarating and terrifying. Ethan fit here, laughing with strangers, his confidence magnetic. Joshua, meanwhile, felt like a shadow, always one step behind. That night, their motel room was another single-bed setup, this one with a view of snow-capped peaks. Ethan sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through photos on his phone. "Look at this," he said, showing Joshua a shot of them at the fair, arms slung around each other. Joshua's smile tentative but genuine. "You look happy here." Joshua's chest ached. "Yeah," he said softly. "I was." Ethan's eyes met his, searching again. "Then why do you keep pulling away?" The question hit like a punch. Joshua opened his mouth, but no words came. He wanted to confess, to let the truth spill out. But the fear was a wall, solid, unyielding. Instead, he mumbled, "I'm just figuring things out." Ethan's expression softened, but there was a flicker of hurt in his eyes. He turned away, and Joshua felt the distance between them grow, even as they lay inches apart in the dark. The next morning, they headed toward Utah, the landscape shifting to red rock canyons that glowed like embers in the sunlight. Ethan was quieter again, his usual spark dimmed. Joshua hated himself for it, for whatever he was doing or not doing that was pushing Ethan away. He wanted to fix it, but he didn't know how. They stopped at Arches National Park, hiking to Delicate Arch under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. At the top, they stood side by side, the vastness of the desert stretching below. Ethan spoke first, his voice low. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever it is, I'm not going anywhere." Joshua's throat closed. He wanted to believe it, to trust that Ethan would stay if he knew the truth. But the risk felt too great. "I know," he lied, his voice cracking. That night, in a motel near Moab, the single bed felt like a battlefield. Joshua lay awake, Ethan's words echoing in his mind. He was tired of running, tired of hiding, but the leap to honesty felt like stepping off a cliff. As Ethan slept, Joshua reached out, his fingers brushing Ethan's hand, a fleeting touch that set his heart racing. He pulled back, but the contact lingered, a spark that refused to die. The Utah desert gave way to Nevada's stark emptiness. The Mustang's engine a steady hum against the silence between Joshua and Ethan. Joshua felt like he was unraveling, each mile stripping away another layer of his defenses. Ethan's quietness had become a mirror, reflecting Joshua's own turmoil back at him, and he didn't know how much longer he could bear it. They stopped in a small town outside Vegas, the kind of place where neon signs flickered against the dusk, promising cheap drinks and cheaper dreams. Their motel was a relic, with peeling paint and a single bed that seemed to mock Joshua's resolve. Ethan dropped his bag and turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You want to talk about it?" Joshua froze. "Talk about what?" "Whatever's eating you," Ethan said, his voice gentle but firm. "You've been a ghost this whole trip. Josh, I'm your best friend. Let me in." The words were a key, turning the lock on Joshua's heart, but fear kept it shut. "I'm fine," he said, the lie tasting bitter. "Just stressed." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded, grabbing his jacket. "I'm going for a walk." "Don't wait up." The door clicked shut, and Joshua sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. He hated this, hated the distance, the lies, the way he was hurting Ethan without meaning to. He wanted to run after him, to spill everything, but the weight of his secret anchored him to the spot. Ethan returned an hour later, his cheeks flushed from the cold. He didn't speak, just climbed into bed, keeping to his side. Joshua lay awake, the space between them a chasm. He wanted to reach across it, to pull Ethan close, but fear held him back, as always. The next day, they drove toward California, the final leg of their journey. The tension was palpable, Ethan's usual chatter replaced by curt responses. Joshua felt like he was losing him, and the thought was unbearable. They stopped at a diner in Barstow, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the waitresses called you hon. Ethan stared out the window, his fingers tapping restlessly. "I'm sorry," Joshua blurted, surprising himself. For being distant, Ethan's eyes softened, but there was still a wall there. "Just tell me what's going on, Josh. I can handle it." Joshua's heart pounded. He was so close to saying it, to letting the truth free, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he reached for Ethan's hand under the table, a fleeting touch that said what he couldn't. Ethan's fingers curled around his, just for a moment, before he pulled away. That night, in a motel near Joshua Tree, the single bed felt like a test. Joshua lay awake, Ethan's breathing steady beside him. He couldn't keep doing this, hiding, pretending, pushing Ethan away. He turned, his hand brushing Ethan's shoulder, and whispered, "I'm scared." Ethan stirred, his eyes opening in the dark. "Of what?" Joshua's voice trembled. "Of losing you." Ethan's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "You won't," he said softly. "But you gotta let me in, Josh. You gotta try." The words were a lifeline, and Joshua clung to them, his heart racing. He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. For the first time, he let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be brave. The California coast unfolded before them, a tapestry of cliffs and crashing waves. But Joshua's world had narrowed to the man beside him. Ethan's hand had lingered in his last night, a silent promise that kept Joshua awake long after the motel room fell dark. He was standing on the edge of something monumental, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to step back. They drove toward Big Sur, the Pacific Ocean glittering like a sheet of glass. Ethan was quieter, but his silences felt different now, less like distance and more like waiting. Joshua stole glances at him, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He wanted to hold on to this, to make it real, but the secret still clung to him, a shadow he couldn't shake. They stopped at a cliffside lookout, the wind carrying the salt of the sea. Ethan leaned against the Mustang, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is it, huh?" he said. Into the road. Joshua's stomach twisted. "Not yet. We got a few days." Ethan turned to him, his expression raw. "That's not what I meant." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Joshua knew this was his moment, the one he'd been running from since they left New York. He took a step closer, his voice barely audible over the waves. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." Ethan's eyes locked onto his, steady and unflinching. "Then tell me." Joshua's heart pounded, the secret clawing its way out. I'm gay," he said, the words trembling in the air. "And I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for years." The world seemed to stop. the waves and wind fading to nothing. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened, a flicker of something, hope, maybe crossing his face. "Josh," he said, his voice thick. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was scared," Joshua admitted, his voice breaking. "Scared you wouldn't feel the same. Scared I'd ruin everything." Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching for Joshua's. "You think I'll let you ruin this?" he said, a small smile breaking through. "Josh, I've been waiting for you to catch up." The confession hit Joshua like a wave, washing away the fear. He laughed, a shaky, relieved sound, and pulled Ethan into his arms. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the ocean roaring below, and for the first time, Joshua felt free. That night, in a seaside motel with, of course, one bed, they didn't keep to their sides. Ethan's arms were around him, their breaths mingling, and Joshua let himself fall into it. No masks, no lies. It wasn't just love, it was home. The final days of the road trip were a blur of joy and discovery, each moment saturated with the newness of Joshua and Ethan's truth. They drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, stopping at hidden beaches and cliffside cafes, their hands intertwined, their laughter unburdened. Joshua had spent so long hiding, but now, with Ethan beside him, he felt like he was seeing the world in color for the first time. Their last stop was a small inn in Mendocino, a quaint town where the cliffs met the sea. The room, predictably, had one bed, but now was a gift, not a challenge. They lay together, the sound of waves seeping through the open window, and Joshua traced the lines of Ethan's face, committing every detail to memory. "You changed everything," Joshua whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so scared to be me, but you made it okay." Ethan smiled, his fingers brushing Joshua's cheek. "You were always you, Josh. You just needed to see it." The next morning, as they packed the Mustang for the final drive to San Francisco, Joshua felt a pang of sadness. The road trip was ending, but it had given him more than he'd ever imagined, not just love, but the courage to claim it. He looked at Ethan, loading their bags with that same easy grace, and knew this was only the beginning. They reached San Francisco at dusk, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing red against the sky. They parked and walked to a lookout point, the city sprawling below, alive with possibility. Ethan took Joshua's hand, and they stood there, two young men who'd found each other in the vastness of the world. "I'm not running anymore," Joshua said, his voice steady. "Not from you. Not from me." Ethan squeezed his hand. "Good. Because I'm keeping you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Joshua felt a weight lift, replaced by a quiet, unshakable certainty. The road had led him here, not just to Ethan, but to himself. And that, he knew, was the real destination.